seduction, and cheating with the Woman of the Year. My name is Logan Langley. Yes, my parents were big fans of alliteration, especially when you add to that my middle name of Laredo, which, by the way, I never use. My wife, Vivian Marlowe, she kept her maiden name, and I had been married for 7 years at the time this story began. A time when marriage, as the ancient 1955, but always relevant Marilyn Monroe movie showed, was dangerous. I don't need to go into the details of our past, but there are a few things you need to know about Vivian and me to understand our story. Vivian was a Division I tennis star, winning the NCAA singles championship her senior year and finishing second in doubles with her partner. She definitely could have been a top pro had it not been for an untimely injury. As it is, she is still good enough to become a top player at almost any tennis club in the world. Besides being a good athlete, Vivian is also very smart. She graduated from Stanford with a 3.90 grade point average. Within a year of graduating, she was already working as a sports agent, representing professional athletes, and since the advent of the NIL, college athletes, in contract negotiations. At the time this story begins, she is 29 years old and has been a licensed sports agent for basketball, tennis, soccer, and volleyball for the past 4 years. She works for a small agency, only 3 agents, all women, and makes a lot of money because she is really good at what she does. Vivian's face cannot be called beautiful. In fact, it's close to average. Her body and character, on the other hand, are not quite ordinary. Her body is toned through constant exercise using proven training techniques, and her character is lively, which gives her real appeal. I, too, was a Division I athlete in college, UCLA volleyball, although I never even thought I had the opportunity to make a professional team overseas. I earned a master's degree in dispute resolution from Pepperdine. At the time this story began, I was 30 years old and now work for a small mediation firm. Like Vivian, there is nothing special about my face, although Vivian thinks it has character. Like Vivian, I have a strong body from regular intense exercise, and if my coworkers and family members are to be believed, I have a friendly and pleasant personality. I don't earn as much as Vivian, but I earn very well, and in general, Vivian and I have no money problems. However, there is one unusual aspect to my job. My firm has a policy that is euphemistically referred to as eat what you shoot, meaning that my earnings are primarily, though not exclusively, determined by the business I personally bring in. Since Vivian and I are both skilled negotiators, it should come as no surprise that we negotiate everything in our marriage. We never utter the dreaded words, "we need to talk," when dealing with each other. Instead, if it comes to something important, we say, "we need to have a negotiating session." My relationship with Vivian is, in a word, great. We are a complete match sexually. We both like our bodies. We are playful as well as romantic, and we rarely argue. And when we do argue, as opposed to negotiate, we do it honestly. In our entire 7-year marriage, I can only remember one night when we went to bed angry, and thankfully, we were able to resolve the argument the next day. Although we both travel for work, we always stay in close contact when we are away from each other and try to do as many things together as possible when we are in the same city at the same time. The only time we've gone to bed angry, Vivian because she guessed about my interaction with another woman, and me because I thought Vivian's reaction was inappropriate, was because of another woman's attention to me. Her name is Francine Bardot. Perhaps the most famous femme fatale in history is Mata Hari, the beautiful Dutch exotic dancer and spy whose seduction techniques and exploits on the side of the Germans during World War II have become legendary. There is no one who knows Francine who doesn't consider her a world-class femme fatale, perhaps even the best. It seems that at least most of the women whose husbands had contact with Francine would have wanted her to suffer the same fate as Mata Hari, execution by French firing squad. Being as objective as possible, I do not find Francine ravishingly beautiful. However, her combination of voluptuous body, flirtatious mannerisms, exotic face, and some inexplicable X factor makes her almost irresistibly desirable to any man. I suppose that is the definition of a femme fatale. Unfortunately, Francine is also smart and wealthy, and as one of her many occupations owns the largest brokerage firm in the United States, so I occasionally socialize with her. Vivian arrived at San Jose International Airport after 3 days of negotiations with several professional soccer players on the East Coast around 4 o'clock Friday afternoon. I was delighted to meet her and gave her a passionate kiss and hug as she exited the security area. As we drove home, we talked about what was going on in our lives in more detail than we had over the phone the previous 3 days. When we got home, we showered together. I only got about 10 slaps in total. And then we lay on the bed and I gave Vivian a half-hour massage, mostly of her back, shoulders, and thighs. She'd had a stressful 3 days on the trip, and she'd pulled a muscle a bit playing sports. Sometimes I think the main reason she married me is because I am the best amateur deep tissue massage therapist in the world, at least in my opinion, which is backed up by Vivian's. Once I had turned Vivian into a purring, inert blob of relaxed protoplasm using my best massage techniques, I made love to her. It took about 20 minutes before Vivian and I were completely lucid. We smiled at each other, hugged, exchanged kisses and I love yous, and then finally got our bodies up and dressed to go out to eat. Before I went to bed, I told Vivian, "We have to negotiate tomorrow morning." "Sure," she laughed, "provided you make another night of love tonight." We did not disappoint each other. We made love all night long, after which we fell fast asleep in each other's arms. The next morning, we each had a small protein shake and then worked out together for an hour in the fully equipped gym. We showered together, no hanky-panky there, and then sat down to a legitimate breakfast that we both made. After breakfast, Vivian asked, "Okay, Logan, what do we need to agree on?" "Before we begin, let me ask you if you have a business trip planned to Texas for the 23rd through the 27th of this month." "Yes, scheduled. What's the problem?" "There's an almost mandatory conference at the swankiest resort in Laguna Beach at the same time, and I was hoping you could come with me," I said nonchalantly. "I'd love to, Logan, but I've already got at least a dozen different people signed up for my meetings in Texas, and it's impossible to reschedule. Why do we need to negotiate? Just go to the conference yourself." "I realize you can't change your plans, Vivian, but the reason we need to negotiate is because Francine Bardot will be there," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. Vivian raised her eyebrows and paused for a moment before speaking again. "How do you know the Bardot femme fatale will be there?" "Because she called me and told me she would be," I replied, again trying to keep my voice neutral. After a pregnant pause, Vivian asked with a stoic expression, "How often do you call Bardot?" "Not once since the night we got angry 2 years or so ago, except once when I called her back. But I was sure it was business-related, and it was," I replied. "How often does she call you?" "Maybe a dozen times since that night about 2 years ago. The last time was 2 days ago." "How many times have you seen her in person in the last 2 years, Logan?" "Twice. Once at a mediation where she stayed for about 15 minutes, and once when she showed up at the restaurant where I had dinner when you were out of town. At the restaurant, she managed to get a seat with 3 of my coworkers and me. I left as soon as she went to the restroom, and without her," I replied. "What do you want to negotiate?" asked Vivian. "I want to make a deal that you don't worry, hold a grudge against me, worry, question me about it later, or otherwise react negatively when I go to the conference, because like I said, not going there would be almost suicidal for business, since there will be brokers from the eastern part of the U.S. there who will probably be deciding who to use as representatives on the West Coast, and I really need to get some of that business," I said in response. "Why don't you just promise me you won't have anything to do with a modern-day Mata Hari?" queried Vivian. "Because I've always been honest with you, and I can't make such a promise with 100% certainty. I can promise that I will do my best to have nothing to do with her, but that is all I can honestly do," I may be weaker than you or I care to believe. She is, as you well know, a legitimate femme fatale. My honest statement had three main effects. The first effect was that Vivian appreciated my honesty. We had both been brutally honest with each other in the past, and both of our professions require honesty in dealing with others, as a lack of candor could ruin our business. The second effect was that she didn't like what I was saying. The third effect was that she didn't know exactly what she wanted to negotiate at that moment. For most couples, without our honesty and willingness to negotiate a compromise we could both live with, my honest assessment could have been the end of the marriage, or at least the beginning of the end. Neither of us wanted that, so negotiation was necessary. After a long pause where we both just sat there, shifting our gazes from one to the other and looking out the window, occasionally sipping on a blueberry and yogurt smoothie, Vivian looked up at me. I need time to think. Let's go to the club and play a couple games of tennis. You got it, I replied with a smile. Since Vivian hitting the ball is a good way to vent her aggression without hurting me, unless she aims the ball at me below my waist, but I have a good cup to protect me from that. And since she always wins against me, even though I always win at least one game in a set, it was the best result I could hope for at the moment. I only won one game that day because I fended off 4 of her 5 first serves as aces in one game. The rest of the set she destroyed me, and the balls she almost knocked the fluff off. My cup did its job when she came to the net twice and hit her shot right back to me below the belt, followed by a completely disingenuous "sorry," to which I just smiled back. After I endured my 6-1, we met a couple who were good friends of ours, even though they were 10 to 12 years older. Janice's wife had started getting into pickleball and had talked her husband Adam and Vivian and I into playing doubles. To keep things fair, since Janice is not very athletic, Vivian and Janice played with Adam and me. In doubles pickleball, Vivian was much less aggressive than in singles tennis and never even hit me below the belt once. Of course, she and Janice still won, but we had fun. And then we had a long and enjoyable lunch with them and another couple. By the time we got home late that Saturday night to get ready for the party, Vivian had at least temporarily gotten over her negative reaction to our negotiations, and we had a great time dancing and making slow, leisurely love after we got home. Several days passed before our negotiations continued. We never negotiate during meals, although sometimes during meals, Vivian and I set procedural rules for negotiating after meals. That's what we did on Tuesday after our first negotiation. Vivian began the continuation of our negotiation session with a welcoming statement that she was really open to finding a solution. I think I'm looking for a way out of our situation on several fronts. I just don't have a situation like yours that I can bargain with, probably because I don't have a little head to think about what my brain should be doing. In other words, the only guys I know who are the equivalent of a femme fatale are assholes who don't interest me no matter how much they hit on me. But I admit that despite your love for me, it's possible that your little head is temporarily controlling you. I couldn't argue with that, so after a pause to give me a chance to object if I was foolish enough to try to do so, she continued. The first thing I want is 15 days in a row, when we're both in town, a half-hour massage, each with a happy ending. I'd love that, I smiled back. Don't agree to anything yet? What a stupid negotiating tactic. Pepperdine should strip you of your master's degree, she snapped back. Sorry, please continue, I replied, trying to look as sheepish as possible. Next, Logan, I don't want to hear any more talk about starting a family until I turn 32 in 2 years and 3 months. Then we can discuss it. But until then, you can't even hint at the subject, as you have annoyingly done for the past 18 months. Having learned the lesson of the last tentative agreement, I remained stoic and simply replied, I understand your desire. Third, for our 7th anniversary, which is coming up in 2 months, I want you to plan a trip to Southeast Asia for 11 days and 10 nights, with first-class accommodations along the way, which you will pay for from one of your own accounts, not one of our joint accounts. This was a big deal to me because I had no interest in traveling to Southeast Asia. Vivian knew that I would never even consider such a possibility, even though, for reasons I don't understand, she had always wanted to go there. Again, I simply said, "I understand your desire. A fourth might be your biggest problem. After we have 2 children, which is my limit, there will come a time when they're not in school yet, and I'll give you 2 weeks' notice that I'm going on a full 10-day vacation. You will have no interest in it, research it, complain about it to anyone, or ask any questions when I return, and you will take care of the children yourself for that entire week, which will require you to take time off from work or only sporadic activities from home." I had the same response. "That's it," she said. "That's 4 things I want." While I wasn't thrilled with all of her suggestions, I could live with them, especially since I knew there were more negotiations and tweaks to come that would mitigate the worst aspects. The only proper response, if we were really having a reasonable negotiation between 2 people who were experienced negotiators, was to set a time and place for the next phase. "I suggest we meet in the living room on Thursday night after dinner, when I'll have a chance to think about your proposals and you'll have a chance to assess whether you have a chance to finalize them." We shook hands, and then I made love to her right in the living room, and she started calling me all sorts of nasty words. So as not to bore you with every step of the negotiations leading up to the final decision we made by Friday, I'll just cut to the chase. What I got out of the negotiations: I was able to go to the conference despite Francine's presence there, with the understanding that I would make every effort not to be seduced by her if she did try to seduce me. Vivian would make sure she had no fears, concerns, or trust issues while I was there or afterwards, and she would never ask me any questions about the conference or what went on there unless I volunteered information about the nature of the meetings and any and all of it. I also obtained some concessions and clarifications as to what she wanted. They were as follows. After she turned 32, she would stop taking birth control and, if physically and medically possible, she would have 2 full-term pregnancies. I could have her mother or my mother help with the children 2 of the 10 days she went on vacation, even to the point where one or both of them would be the primary helpers for those 2 days. When she went on vacation, she never traveled one-on-one with a man, regardless of his age or status. Finally, on the Southeast Asia trip, I didn't have to make arrangements to go to India or Pakistan. Vivian got everything else she asked for. On Friday afternoon, we drew up a document outlining all aspects of our deal, and we both signed and dated it. That evening, we went out to dinner with 2 other couples, had extremely intense sex when we returned home, and never mentioned the negotiated contract again. The conference was very helpful from several perspectives. First, because I learned a lot in the educational sessions. The second reason it was worthwhile was that I gained 4 new clients, 2 of which were very significant because they were major brokers on the East Coast, and I personally was their contractor on the West Coast. One of the new clients was introduced to me by Francine, recommending that I be hired because there was a conflict in her firm. The third and fourth reasons were related. They both involved Francine. I honestly tried my best to resist Francine, and make no mistake, she tried her best to seduce me. Truthfully, I don't know why she was making every effort to seduce me. Maybe it was a rivalry with Vivian whom she didn't like. Maybe because there was something about me that intrigued her. Maybe because it was a challenge, and she never shied away from a challenge. Maybe because one of her co-workers was an old girlfriend of mine who told her things she wanted to find out for herself. Maybe because she hated me. I just don't know. And I only spent a couple hours trying to figure it out before I just said, "Away with it all," and stopped forever trying to figure out why she wanted to seduce me. Francine, however, was an absolute seductress. I still don't know exactly how she manipulated me and overcame my determination to resist her, but the penultimate night of the conference we went for a walk on the beach. I ended up having sex with her as we lay on a blanket on a remote stretch of beach, probably a quarter-mile from our resort. And then we got a room for the night at a clean but simple motel, not far from that part of the beach, on the other side of the Pacific Coast Highway from the sand. In the motel room, I had sex with the femme fatale up to 4 times. The next morning, I was totally annoyed and felt guilty. Francine didn't want to do this. "What is your problem, Logan?" she asked sympathetically. "I didn't mean to cheat on Vivian. I love her with all my heart." "Didn't you like it? You met my expectations?" She laughed. "Cindy was right about you." Cindy was her co-worker who I dated before I met Vivian. "I'm a cheater, but not a liar. The sex with you was phenomenal. It didn't involve love like with Vivian, but it was absolutely top-notch sex. You are the epitome of a sultry woman, Francine, even if I hate you for it." "Look, asshole, no one, except maybe Cindy," Francine started to say, but then she saw the look of horror on my face. "Okay, no one, not even Cindy, is going to find out about this from me. I need 2 concessions in return." I didn't have the energy to bargain, so I meekly replied, "What?" "I need you to go back to the resort, get my room key, take my blue and white dress, sandals, and hat from my room, put them in my little suitcase, and come here with it. Then I want to get a half-hour deep tissue massage. Cindy says you're also famous for that, and then drive me back to the resort. You can drop me off 100 yards before the parking lot so we won't be seen together." Considering what she could have asked for, it was a mere trifle. I did as requested and changed my own clothes when I got to the resort. However, by the time I finished my massage, there was a problem. I hated myself for working on her perfect figure and embossed thighs, but I was becoming more and more infiltrated with attraction. When after half an hour, Francine had turned into the same inert, purring blob of protoplasm that Vivian usually became after a massage, I couldn't help myself. We took off our clothes and had sex. Afterward, we showered. No hanky-panky. We got dressed, I dropped her off in the parking lot in front of the resort, and the rest of the day we both walked side by side, but never once looked each other in the eye. So the third thing I learned was that Francine was an excellent love partner, as good as any male who thought she would be. The fourth thing I learned in the couple months after having sex with Francine was that I never had any desire to go back to that woman and that I could channel my guilt into being a better husband to Vivian. It is now 8 years after my conference talks, and my marriage is stronger than ever. Vivian has never once asked a single question about the conference, and I haven't shared anything except that I got 4 new clients. Vivian enjoyed 15 consecutive days of deep tissue massage and the spectacular sex that followed each massage, to the highest degree. Our 7th anniversary trip to Southeast Asia wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, primarily because it made Vivian so happy, and thereby made me happy, and also because she was a tigress in bed every night during the trip. I never bothered Vivian about having children until the day after her 32nd birthday. By then, she was off birth control, and I didn't even have to ask. I believe we were both so fertile that she got pregnant within 2 or 3 days of her birthday as a result of almost constant sex over the holiday weekend. We now have a 4.5-year-old girl and a 2.5-year-old boy who we love with all our hearts. Vivian is enjoying the kids so much, despite how difficult they are, that she considered canceling her vacation. I talked her out of it. The kids and I kissed Vivian goodbye a few hours ago as she began her 10-day vacation from our marriage and family. I will miss her dearly, but we have both honored the terms of our agreement thus far, and I hope we will continue to do so in the future. At least that's what I tell myself as I help the kids enjoy all the playground equipment at our local park. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.